Welcome to Shared Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies with BusinessDesk. My name is Brooke Roberts, one of the co-founders and co-CEOs at Sharesies. Today on the program, we're going to look at the B Corp movement and why that is relevant to retail investors. I'll be joined by Alex, the board co-chair of B Lab Australia and Aotearoa, and Mindy, the director of certification and programs at B Lab. Before we get started, here's some important information.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording.
Welcome, Mindy and Alex. Let's start with defining what B Corp is, in case anyone is unsure. Alex, maybe you can answer, and then Mindy, if you don't mind telling us a bit about the uptake in Australia.
Sure. Kia ora, everyone. Brooke, thanks for having us on within B Corp month as well. So it's a busy time for us and a special time for us. In the simplest terms, B Corp is a certification for businesses who see their role to create a positive impact in the world as an equal kind of mission to their, sort of role in creating value and profits to their shareholders. So it's a holistic business certification. It's not narrowly defined by climate or, supply chain. It looks at all aspects of how a business performs and all aspects of how a business contributes to society.
And why is that important? Why is it important to measure that? And why do businesses want to do that?
I mean, we all know that the world is going through, an incredible period of acceleration at the moment. But the number of risks around society, environment, indeed culture, how we are with each other, are also very tangible. So I think this is a question that, sort of business is not just here to extract value, but, business exists, the economy exists, within the context of a functional society, which exists within the context of a healthy environment. So for business to succeed over the long term, it needs to attend to, the context that it exists in. I think more transactionally speaking, consumers want more for business, expect more from business. So there's an intrinsic need for business to show up in a different way and make sure it contributes value to the world as well as its shareholders. But there's actually a strategic imperative there as well. If you want to recruit the right talent, if you want to get the right investors, if you want to, manage market risk and, what your consumers will think about you, you better show up and, tell a good story. And especially now we're becoming more skeptical about greenwashing. A certification provides that point of proof, that point of trust, which separates those that talk the talk from those that are actually walking the walk.
Yeah, it's a great point of proof in a lot of ways. Obviously, when you go through a certification process, which we'll talk about a bit more, it is pretty in detail and really gets to explore your business. And as a business leader, it's so great to be able to just see what are the things we should be thinking about as a company and what are ways that we are having an impact on our customers, the environment, our employees and all of that. So I'm really proud that we're a B Corp and I agree. I think every business should exist for a real positive social and environmental impact. And I think that's what people will be expecting from now on. And so it's great to see more companies joining the B Lab and B Corp movement. And I've definitely noticed that since we were like the first financial services company in Aotearoa to become a B Corp. And now we've got banks on there like Kiwi Bank and cooperatives. So there's quite a lot more growth that's happened. Mindy, do you want to tell us about in Australasia, how many companies are B Corps now? What ones are listed maybe and the percentages there and any kind of information you would like to share?
Yeah, kia ora, Brooke, and hello, everyone. Thanks for having me and Alex. We have been really encouraged by the uptake of certified B Corps in the region. Currently, they're close to 700. I think we're just maybe a couple away from 700 in Australia and Aotearoa, and there are 154 in Aotearoa today. And out of those, 50 were certified in the last 12 months. And so that's a really encouraging growth since the first B Corp certified it in Christchurch 12 years ago. So we've seen this growth accelerate really in the last few months and years. And today, the total 154 B Corps in Aotearoa contribute to 6.5 billion of the local economy. And I did some quick maths, and I think that's about 1.5% of the local GDP, which is really encouraging. You asked about listed companies as well. There are two at the moment, Kathmandu and Sinlay. And this is represent about 1% of the total number of B Corps, which is actually higher than the global number, of which there's 60 public listed B Corps globally out of the 8,400 global B Corps. And the B Corp community is pretty diverse. They make up of companies of various size and different sectors. In Aotearoa, and similar to in most regions, we have a large number of professional and technical service firms making up about a third of the community here in Aotearoa, and followed by retail and wholesale that sell a product, approximately a quarter of the community, I would say. And I think because of New Zealand's industry, manufacturing goods come next, followed by other sectors like finance and agriculture.
Yeah, it's a massive that growth, even from that first B Corp here in Aotearoa 12 years ago. And obviously this started internationally and was brought here. So it's got a lot of credibility in terms of its tenure, really, and then the massive growth you've seen over the last couple of years. Really interested in, last year when we saw a bit of an economic U-turn, inflationary pressures increase, costs on businesses increase. Have you seen a change in sentiment in terms of companies wanting to be a B Corp and that balance of profit and purpose?
Well, I think when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were bracing ourselves for a slowdown. But in fact, the opposite has happened, where the B Corp community doubled since then in 3 years. And we've looked at the numbers in Aotearoa before, and it's really, we've gained a third of the community in the last 12 months. So we're not really seeing a slowdown, really. And in fact, we're on track to reach 200 B Corps by the next year, I would hope. And whilst there must be something to be said about cost and resource constraints, given, a tighter market, we also see that companies are leaning into their purpose, and pursuing certification is a way to differentiate themselves in a competitive environment, especially in export and overseas markets. An example of this is our partnership with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is now entering its 4th year. We've now worked with 150 companies in supporting export-led businesses to undertake the B Impact Assessment tool, which is the same free tool that we use for certification. And we're not really seeing a slowdown there too. In fact, lots of interest from companies to remain competitive. So it's really encouraging.
I mean, the emphasis on, certification isn't easy, as you'll know. But to frame it around costs, I think sort of is a bit of a red herring, rather than seeing it as a value driver. I'm just thinking, and there's many examples, but one anecdote from a large size Australian B Corp reckoned that, just through kind of retention of talent alone, they kind of more than multiple sort of, many multipliers on their sort of the costs around sort of certification processing. So I think, while the, current context is constrained, there's also a real value argument around how you differentiate yourself, both to, your employees and your customers.
Have you seen an increase in consumer sentiment or people understanding about the B Corp and actually seeking out B Corps when they're looking at, their purchasing decisions?
Yeah, I think people are definitely expecting more from businesses that they buy from as well as they work for. The Ipsos Global Trends tells us that 80% of people agree that brands can make money and support good causes at the same time. And 2 out of 3 people want to buy products from brands that act responsibly, even if it costs more. We did conduct some brand research recently and found that 1 in 2 people in Australia and New Zealand agree that certifications and sustainability credentials impact their decision-making, and this is particularly among younger cohorts as well. The brand awareness research that we did recently revealed that our average awareness in Australia is 18% and 15% in Aotearoa. but it trends higher among the younger groups, as mentioned earlier, and it comes in at about 30% brand awareness, which is actually, we were pleasantly surprised.
Brooke, I also wonder if we're going to see a bit of a feedback loop as we get more big companies certified and they leverage their market presence in order to basically kind of uplift the B Corp brand as well. Like I had a little moment when I got a new cash card from KiwiBank the other day, and I was just like, oh, there's the B. And, and of course, some of the sort of, larger, well-known and well-loved brands like Patagonia, what have you, are really sort of, foot forward on promoting the B Corp certification. So, yeah, I think as the numbers get bigger, but also the companies within the movement get bigger, we're going to start to see a bit of kind of acceleration in recognition.
Alex, I want to dig into the B Corp accreditation, and how does that stack up versus, businesses have, especially listed companies, have a lot more expectations on them from the government around climate reporting across Australia and New Zealand, but with the rising expectations on businesses having to meet a certain standard, how does the B Corp accreditation sit within that?
Yeah, I'll come at this a few different ways. One thing that's just fresh in mind is the Harvard Business Review just released an article the other week around the success of, effectively the B Corp as a certification. And one of the things that they identified was it's been the ability of the standard to keep a robustness to it. So it's always, sort of creating challenge to business, so it above and beyond, it's asking more. But that also that it's found a way to be adaptive to different geographies, different sizes and different sectors. So there's a sense of it's dynamic in so much as our standards are always evolving. And we, if we're seeing a sort of a bell curve, we want to be constantly shifting the bell curve further. So it's not a question of just sort of meeting the standards and then you're kind of good to go. We will constantly ask more from certified B Corps because ultimately we're not just here about providing a proof point for the business. We're about trying to shift the economy towards something which is actually going to not wreck the place and be better for people for the longer term. So that sort of adaptability and also progression is something which I think is really powerful. I think the other thing is it's like, what do you want to certify for? So if it's purely a trust point, well, actually, put it another way, I don't think the majority of B Corp certify just to basically provide that message to the market. We are transitioning to a space where we do need to shift the economy, and to a certain degree, we're all trying to figure that out together. So one of the things about sort of the standards, because it's holistic across the whole business, it also creates scaffolding to enable businesses to figure out what they can and can be doing to get better. So it's sort of an overall business improvement framework as well as this kind of market-facing standard. And then I think the multiplier on that is you then also become part of a community. So, that can be good for business, in terms of B Corps tend to trade with B Corps, but it's also really powerful for learning. So this stuff is tricky, this stuff is hard. How are you doing it? Sort of what's relevant for me? What might we do together? The last thing I would say is we've really recognized that as the regulations and market becomes more demanding of all these different standards, that we don't want to create an additional layer of burden. So businesses have to do this, and this. And especially in the new set of standards, we're looking to basically incorporate more specialized standards into our framework. So if a business, needs something specific because of their sector or their size, if they're compelled to get a certain certification, that will then overlap and have value within our overall holistic framework. So we're just being sensitive that we want to make sure that while we want to challenge businesses, we also want to kind of appreciate the capacity load that they're under and create the context to be as enabling as possible. So we're focusing the challenge on the right things.
Cool. So not doubling up work if you've already got,
doubling up work. I was probably missing the biggest one out of the lot, though. that the B Corp certification also seeks to hardwire the commitment to stakeholder governance. So, like we require organizations to actually embed it in their constitutions. And I think that's so powerful. And it's not easy. Again, I would say that this is the area where we experience a lot of friction, potentially with the larger companies that basically have to go to their shareholders and say, can we consider other people apart from you? Can we consider the environment apart from you? So they're difficult conversations, but having it in the governing documents really sort of gets over that hurdle around greenwashing. Because effectively, if you're not good to what you say, then you're actually breaking the law. So, it becomes more than a marketing thing. It becomes, a really intrinsic driver.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we put, that into, our purpose really embedded in our constitution as a founder, I can, sleep easy on that, knowing, whatever happens to me or as, the company has intergeneration, continues intergenerationally, that is just core and will never change. I'm intrigued on how what the movement is doing to encourage change with, big company polluters or those perceived to be doing or creating harm in some way. How does the movement move them?
As Alex said before, we are increasingly working with large companies as well. And I think, environmental impacts are obviously much more visible than other impacts such as the S and the G. But it's also fair to say that, companies that use resources to make products will inherently have a negative impact on the environment. So what we do to manage that at B-Lab is we've always had a set of risk standards for specific industries and practices that are additional minimum requirements that companies have to meet before they can certify. And this list of companies that's publicly available on our the list of industries and practices are publicly available on our website. And B-Lab publishes our position that we take on these industries for them to be deemed eligible. So an example of that might be fossil fuel and energy companies who are, disproportionately responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, contribute to global warming. So for energy companies that want to certify, they have to show that they've successfully transitioned their energy portfolio to be at least 50% carbon-free and commit to making progress towards, net zero or carbon-free within specific timeframes. So these are the additional requirements for specific industries. And I think it's important that we take a position to try to work with companies and to encourage them to do the right thing rather than, not ignore them and therefore nothing will change. Business will be as usual. So importantly, as Alex may have mentioned as well, the standards are changing, and you mentioned that, Brooke. And our overall standards will be changing to go away from, to replace the flexible 80 points system across any area, to introduce a set of minimum requirements across 9 topics. And we're all very excited about this, what's coming, because it's going to lift the bar for all companies.
I really like that philosophy that I've definitely noticed from my conversations with B-Lab over the years of call in rather than call out. Like as B Corps, we've got a responsibility to get in there and help drive the change, not just be like, oh, we're not going to work with you for that reason. It's like when I've had these conversations over the years when we've thought about different partnerships or the way that we grow Sharesies. And I really like that method of like, let's call in and drive that change together. Mindy, you as a certification expert, you see a bunch of companies do the impact assessment, they, reach a certain threshold and they come to you to go, yeah, we really want to be certified. What's the biggest hurdle you find that typically companies have to face when they want to become a B Corp?
I would say if they've decided to certify, that is a really big win because the commitment to it means that the resourcing will come and getting the skills and the people involved will come. But something I heard recently attending the Sustainability Leaders Summit in Melbourne a few weeks ago is that most sustainability teams, just like I think companies seeking B Corp certification, is challenged with embedding ESG or sustainability as a mindset across the whole organization. resourcing is always an issue, and even for the biggest companies who have sustainability teams of 5 or 6 people, and they cover a range of big projects like their sustainability strategy and net zero initiatives and reporting, it just feels like it's a small team of people pushing big boulders up the hill. And so I think those who are successful are those who have managed to embed the sustainability thinking and culture within the business units and have the business units own the initiatives and own the decision-making, where everyone can see how their day-to-day role is connected to the company purpose and strategy. So I think it's a mindset shift that is not common in most companies today, but I think the sustainability officers and the B Corp teams are really here to shift mindsets and way people think about their roles in organizations, and I see that both as a hurdle but also as an opportunity.
What do you think? Are there any practical tips you've got for directors and CEOs who might be listening who go, yeah, I want this to happen, I just don't know how can I best change that mindset? Have you seen any examples where you think, are there any kind of practical examples you might have or you've seen in practice?
Yeah, I think leadership is really important. The most successful examples that I've seen are driven top down as well as bottom up. I think getting, the hurdle of getting through to leadership and getting through to why purpose has to be linked to strategy, not as a side thing, a side initiative. I think that speaks to, I think it comes back to leadership around sort of the long-term thinking of a business.
Going back to point, none of this is easy, but CEOs and boards are the ones that have agency. And I don't think it's any surprise that, going back into the history of B Corps, we had more kind of, smaller, younger, dynamic organizations certifying first, because they, it was the founders who could say, this is what I stand for, this is what I want my company to stand for, and this is what we're going to do. Obviously, when you get to larger scale companies, they have a lot more inertia. There's many more things that hold them in place. But at that point, it is absolutely leadership and those that hold authority in those organizations which, get to make the calls. And I think, generally outside of whether people want to opt into becoming a B Corp or not, that's where we need a lot of the movement. We need a movement at the corporate leadership level.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I thought of one example which I think could be quite helpful, because I know it definitely helped us, was if your company hasn't done a B impact assessment, have that as a project that's embedded, that's kicked off in your company. For us, it was easy to get that information. For others, it might be, you might need a little team within your company that specialize in different areas, from people experience to product to help fill out certain sections. But then once you've got that B impact assessment done, I encourage every director and CEO to go through all of the questions and the answers in it. There might be 200. It's, think of it like an audit in yourself. And it is a fantastic way to look at a real holistic audit of your business and go, where are we really, exceeding expectations, and where are we falling short? And are we okay with where we're falling short, or do we need to make change? And I just think it's a really great holistic review of your company, and it's free, and you don't even have to submit a certification. But I think that's one baseline I'd recommend to any director or CEO to implement. Alex, I want to talk about how are the standards evolving? We have talked about it a little bit, and are there any relatable examples that kind of demonstrate that change?
Yeah, so Mindy said, there are basically some foundational standards. So there are sort of minimum requirements, which I think kind of impose an integrity, kind of, sort of into the standards. Not that that wasn't there before, but it reinforces that. And then we sort of break out into sort of more performance area, which go everything from the way that you engage with your employees, kind of the way that you govern your organization, your relationship to climate and the atmosphere. The one standard that's come up that I find really interesting is around collective action. And because I think this really tests the threshold of how businesses see themselves and see themselves as actors in society and change actors. So, Brooke, I mean, you were mentioning, just before, a business's relationship to the community and kind of where you operate. And, so this sort of, invitation around collective action, for businesses, not just to be good in terms of what they do themselves, but starting to realize where they can work with others and the capabilities that they can bring to a lot of stuff that happens more broadly in civil society, which could, massively kind of benefit from kind of their cooperation and collaboration. So the whole idea around sort of, multi-actor initiatives, and I've been doing some work with a really interesting initiative in Melbourne called Regen Melbourne, which is a whole kind of citywide transformation initiative, which is trying to sort of work across public, private sector, civil society to think about what are the big things that we need to shift in this city to position ourselves for the long-term future. And they come up with these sort of wonderful, collective challenges like, make the Birrarung River swimmable. And, that might sound quite simple, but to realise it would require massive systemic and structural change. But the whole of that city and all the businesses, many of the businesses that are in it, owe something to the lifeblood of that city through the river. So, so how do businesses start to show up with other actors and kind of make sure they take care of the thing which has enabled them to do exist and trade in the first place? I think, sort of also that sort of collective action, we were just at a B Corp event in Victoria a few weeks ago called Assembly. It was an incredible event. And you could see a lot of the businesses were really grappling with, like, what's this going to mean for us? And some of them felt a bit daunted. Others felt really energized. But there was also, actually, it was literally the last moment of the whole program when one of our Maori B Corps said, you're probably overthinking this, because if you're driven by your values, the connection to others and the wider environment, just comes more naturally. So going back to this mind state shift, we've been asking businesses to come in to, think about their relationship to society and the environment and their employees in more detail. I think we're going to be asking another mind state shift now in terms of, like, what does it mean to create value? And, and how embedded are your values? And if they are embedded, what do they then invite you to do? So I think that's a kind of, it's going to be an interesting hurdle in the first instance, but might be an area of really rich development, into the future.
Yeah, and it sounds like a way that businesses, or in particular B Corps within a local community, can collaborate and help drive that change together.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, Brooke, that it's not, yes, the local community collaborating obviously makes sense, but it also could be industries collaborating. An example of this is the B Corp Beauty Coalition that started with a number of European beauty B Corps, but now we have Australian and New Zealand companies represented, where they're coming together as an industry to face up on some of the hardest challenges that would be easier if you went together with others. And so this idea of sharing the challenge, sharing knowledge, and what they've done at this collective is also to publish their collective findings so that they bring others along the journey. And I think that's hugely inspiring. And I think that's honestly what's needed to face the challenges of our time.
So a bit of cooperation to drive that systemic change. So talking about the final question, Alex, and talking about the B Corp movement, looking 5 years out, what do you hope the movement will achieve in a nutshell?
Yeah, the future stuff's always tricky, right? Because we tend to frame the future in what we know now. But if I think through kind of a lens of, how will B Lab, B Corps as a movement have more influence and impact, a few things come to mind. So one, it would just be handy if, you could just adopt, a third-party accreditation in order to then potentially determine who you invite onto your platform. I think we're going to see more of that. Okay, so the whole point of as more scrutiny and standards come down across the economy, having B Corp certification is likely to be a shortcut to investors and procurers in terms of we want them either in our portfolio or our supply chain because it's trustworthy, it's transparent, and and I think that will kind of increase demand for certification, which will hopefully lead to sort of more companies seeing value in certification and then a growing of the movement. I think we're starting to see more B Corps, and this is part of the collective action thing, sort of organize around things that they care about, be that, kind of the beauty industry or, sort of more recently in Australia around climate. So it'd be interesting to see, does, the B Corp network become a platform for businesses to be able to have a more influential voice in what they kind of want from government? And will the fact that these companies are good companies and generally wanting to sort of contribute, to, all of us rather than extract, will they sort of also be heard? So I think that's going to be one sort of interesting area. Additionally, for us as B Lab, we're starting to sit on this mountain of knowledge and data. We have got information on companies in every geography, every sector of all sizes. So as we collectively trying to figure out how we shift to, a new economy, we should be thinking about how we harness that data to be able to inform practice and policy. Every business school should basically be drawing on kind of, the movement of B Corps, effectively as an external faculty. This is how business looks now. Certainly this is how business will look like in the future. So that's one area I think that is a challenge to us that we need to get better. Now we've got this growing movement. How do we actually kind of better harness all the knowledge and learning it's creating? And the last one I'd say is we're also mindful that B Lab is not the only network or movement which is trying to shift things to be, fairer and more sustainable. So again, we've got a lot of work to do to connect with those other movements, whether it's social enterprise, whether it's shared value, whether it's donut economics, all these different tribes who see the world differently, but essentially working towards the same goals. We need to find ways to sort of, stitch those relationships together so we become, a bigger coalition and ultimately become the norm.
So you need to do your own collective action, I'm hearing.
We need to do our own collective action.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex and Mindy. It's been really fascinating to dive a bit more behind the scenes on what it takes to become a B Corp and also, how the standards that B Corps are held to and how important that is for retail investors, but also all stakeholders. So thanks heaps for the mahi you're all doing. And thanks heaps for those that are tuning in. You can watch Shared Lunch on YouTube or follow us on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or wherever. Please leave us a 5-star rating and a comment with who you'd like to hear from next. We also have a special offer for Sharesies investors from BusinessDesk. If you use the promo code SharedLunch2024, you'll get $100 off an annual subscription with BusinessDesk, and that's usually about $249, including GST. The offer only applies to new BusinessDesk subscribers, can only be used once per subscriber, and can't be used with any other discount. And that's enough from me. Enjoy the rest of your week. Ka kite anō. Kia ora.